All right. Thank you so much for joining us on the Graduate Subsidized Health Insurance Program presentation for the summer series. What a title that is. I will generally be referring to it as GSHIP moving forward, just to keep things, timely. My name is Logan Gowers. As many of you are already aware, you've probably seen or interacted with me before. As a small note, I have a bit of a cold, so if I'm coughing, I apologize, but I will do my best to make sure this is clear and concise as we are moving forward. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat or wait until the end and we'll happily go over those with you together. Now, we're going to cover a few things as far as a glossary of terms. This is mostly beneficial as there are some terms that we're going to be kind of tossing around a lot today that may be very new to some people or very well known, but it helps to just have a good idea of what we're all talking about. As we mentioned before, the Graduate Student Health Insurance Program is the GSHIP. We will be referring to it as GSHIP most commonly as we move forward. Additionally, there is department paid insurance. Some departments do choose to subsidize or fully cover insurance premiums for their students. And these are generally our students who are not eligible for GSHIP. This is department paid insurance. So when we say department paid, this is what we're referring to. Some departments may offer dependent coverage as well, which we'll talk a bit about as we move forward. And finally, we have voluntary or direct coverage. This is when a student who is not eligible for GSHIP and does not have any department paid options available, these students essentially will be covering themselves. They can enroll insurance directly and pay the full premium for that. They do need to enroll during open enrollment periods, especially for United, and they must be enrolled in at least 3 or more credit hours to still be eligible. We do have a continuation clause as part of that. So if the student was covered by GSHIP or department paid previously, generally the previous semester for fall or spring, then the student may enroll in a continuation of coverage via the My Account section of their UHCSR website. As a reminder, we would ask that people mute themselves wherever possible, just so that we can keep a clear recording. Thank you. Now, what is GSHIP itself? The GSHIP is the official insurance program that is administered by the graduate school. It is for those students who qualify for subsidized insurance through the tuition benefit program. Coverage of dependents is not subsidized as part of this process. The department and program may offer dependent coverage if you are feeling so kind and exciting, but that is through department paid insurance, and that is your decision to make. Health insurance carrier for this is United Healthcare Student Resources, UHCSR, or sometimes United for short. However, a word of caution with that. The United Healthcare Student Resources is actually separate from just United Healthcare normally. And so when students are looking for these things and looking at this information, we want to make sure we are directing them to United Healthcare Student Resources. And all outreach and information with that really should use that title, just so we make sure students are finding the most accurate and interacting with the most accurate information. Now, the same student health insurance policy is actually offered to all university students. You probably see this name and this policy all over campus. So a lot of these details are going to be similar. It's more on how we interact with it or make sure we are covering it. Additionally, we do offer vision and dental as part of this, and it is included as part of the GSHIP program. And that carrier is Educators Mutual Insurance, more commonly just referred to as EMI. Now, there are some differences between those two, especially in the way that billing and certain enrollment processes are handled. So we're going to talk a little bit about both of that as we're moving forward today. I will try to make sure that that is clearly delineated with United on one side and EMI on the other. But if you have any questions about the differences between the two, please make sure to ask those when we get to the appropriate part of the presentation. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is the effective dates for each of these processes. Specifically, when does this insurance cover? How long does it cover? For GSHIP, and when we're getting these things moving forward, generally the fall semester will cover 8/16 to 12/31. In fact, that should be consistent every time. You'll notice that lands pretty nicely with certain pay periods. And then our spring and summer semester coverage actually goes from the 1st of January all the way until August 15th. When we do our spring enrollments, it is in such a way that it covers for the entirety of that period. And therefore, students who are enrolled in spring continue to have coverage throughout the summer semester. This includes if they are not a student during the summer. So this is very helpful for your students who are, for example, graduating and they are, hoping to keep that insurance coverage going. They will continue to have that up until 8/15. Now, department paid follows very similar guidelines, but it is good to note that departments do have some flexibility about when they can add students during the semester. With GSHIP, we do our enrollments as quickly and as early as possible and continue really throughout the semester, but departments do have a little more flexibility on when they can add their students to their coverage. They can also have fall, spring, or summer individual coverages where we only do fall and spring or summer. These ones are kind of boxed differently. We also have had instances where we've seen departments have added coverage in the middle of a month or in the middle of kind of periods. And so there's a little more flexibility with that, but that is, again, something you're paying for as a department. So just something that's very important to keep in mind. Qualifying life events are a big deal as part of department paid insurance. We've seen that come up a lot when students are being added or removed as part of that whole mid-month process. Now, eligibility, who can be on GSHIP specifically? Now, the big thing is really it's our assistantships. These are our research assistants, our teaching assistants, graduate research assistants, graduate assistant teaching assistants, assistants. They must be supported at 100% tuition benefit. However, those who are only supported at 75% or 50% are not going to be eligible for the GSHIP. Additionally, our graduate fellows are not eligible for the GSHIP. The reason for that is that they are not funded through payroll, and that's one of the biggest reasons, as payroll is the primary method for which the premium is collected. And therefore, fellowships really just can't fall into that category as they are not a payroll, support type. Departments can choose to cover your GFs if you are feeling the need or you want to make sure that still is there for them. That is through department paid insurance, however, and so that is a cost that you will need to take on. International GFs are automatically enrolled with United Healthcare and Student Resources by the Student Health Center and by Cary Hill in that area. So all international students do have a form of insurance that comes kind of pre-built as part of their enrollment, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. So you may see that you're not needing to really bring your GF students in if they are international. However, that is something that you need to decide. You may choose you still want to cover that for whatever reason, especially because the international insurance doesn't have all the same coverage. For example, EMI, the dental vision, is not included as part of that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Now, international GFs are not automatically enrolled for vision and dental, so that is something that we'll need to cover then. Now, how is GSHIP funded? Where does this money come from? Well, the employer payroll benefit is 100% of where those charges come from. That you, as the employer, will be seeing that cost. The GSHIP premium will always be charged to the appropriate chart field for the payroll benefit account that the student is paid from. So please make sure that when you're setting up payroll, that you're setting up all the appropriate funding types. The graduate school collects an employer payroll benefit expense for each fall and spring from the appropriate TA benefit pools, the appropriate RA benefit allotments, and the GR or GT activities. As a note, you'll notice those are benefit pools and allotments, and then the GR GT activities are very direct. GRG activities are really considered a true cost to that activity when this is being paid. So it's very important that you are considering that moving forward. You should really only consider adding them to GSHIP if there is funds available to do so. You will be seeing that cost very directly, and it is 100% of that premium cost. Now, RAs must be paid from the grants, that is that 5,000 fund with the benefit allotment for each semester, and TAs come from the 1,001 fund that we expect that to come from. So that is a bit more aside and something you can anticipate as you're bringing in your students and offering this to them. The spring premium is generally going to be larger, this because it includes that summer coverage as well. It includes more dates. So you will see an increase in cost for that as it is covering a larger period of time. It is important to remember that this is billed on top of student pay as a benefit as well as you're moving forward, as you're offering this to your students. Now, the enrollment part of it for GSHIP is actually fairly straightforward for your guys' side. The department will indicate if the student has elected GSHIP through the portal as you are doing your entry. When you're providing all that information, there is that health insurance box that has got that blue arrow there. You'll select that appropriately, and that kind of tells us how we need to move forward. If I see that that student has been marked for health insurance, we will move forward with enrolling them for both United and for EMI as soon as we are able to do so. We enroll them multiple times per week. In fact, I'm kind of going to be trying to push for as many times that week as we can, every day if possible, up to the closure of the TB portal. Students must have signed off on their offer and be registered for 9 credits, however, for me to move forward with that enrollment. This shows me that they will be eligible and are eligible for that GSHIP. If that is not being met, I will not be able to enroll them. I will generally try to reach out to my coordinators who are having this experience. Like if I see a student in your area that you've elected for health insurance is not meeting those requirements, you'll also notice those are generally the same requirements to actually receive tuition benefit. So it's generally a good thing to have that addressed as soon as possible. Please receive verification from your students that they want to be on the GSHIP, however. You want to make sure that any students that you are enrolling actually want to be a part of this process, because if for some reason they do not want to be a part of this process, it is more difficult to remove them later. So we want to make sure that we are not enrolling students who do not want to be a part of GSHIP. Now, once the portal closes, it is highly discouraged to try to make changes to this. The insurance census really needs to stay stagnant and consistent as we move forward from that point. It becomes a very manual process to want to do any more enrollments or things after that. And so you'll need to let us know if something strange or unusual has happened, but it is best to try to prepare and be as proactive to make sure we can get all these enrollments done well before that deadline. Now, department paid enrollment. Some departments choose to pay the premiums for the student, as we mentioned before. This is separate from the GSHIP in the way that the payment is processed. However, it is still very much the same insurance as far as it goes through that United Student Healthcare resource. Graduate students taking 3 or more credits are eligible to be a part of this insurance still. So that's really the only requirement you need to watch out for in that regard. Most departments may only need to enroll domestic graduate fellows. Like those are the only students you may see that fall into this need, as others will either fall into GSHIP or may already be covered by other sources that are adequate for them, such as the international insurance. Student Health directly enrolls those international students into the United Healthcare portal, and that is through Carey Hill, as I mentioned before. So you may only need to see your cases of those GF students. Remember to report any insurance payment and reimbursements made on behalf of students to scholarship admin. We'll talk a little bit about what that will look like and what kind of information you need to include, but it is essentially a miscellaneous item type. So it is very important that that is included. And finally, as a note, even on department paid insurance, all coverage is going to automatically terminate as of August 15th. That will always be the last day that this coverage continues through. This is because of contractual reasons and such. So your students will need to be re-enrolled at the beginning of each fall for coverage to continue. And generally, it will be by semester. Now, you will use the provided enrollment health spreadsheet to enroll for United Healthcare when you are doing your enrollments for them on the department paid side. And or your enrollment with EMI is going to be done by the online portal. If you need access to either the spreadsheet or the portal for whatever reason, generally if you are newer and haven't interacted with these elements before, please reach out to us so that we can facilitate that process, make sure you're getting the appropriate spreadsheets, and that you are getting access to the appropriate portals. The EMI portals require some very specific logins, so we want to make sure that we are kind of making sure you get that access and are able to move forward effectively. Please also be sure that you're using the correct insurance location code for your department. We did make sure that insurance location codes are the same between United and EMI. So for example, our location code on the general GSHIP is 1. So we will make sure that it stays 1 between United and EMI. That represents the same department. We will make sure yours are the same. For the health plan, you will submit your spreadsheet to SID Premium at UHCSR.com. As a note, you are going to be sending sensitive student information. This could include things like social security numbers, addresses, phone numbers, names. These are things that you generally don't want to be sent very unprotected. So it is very important that when you're sending these, you'll want to add PHI to the beginning of the subject line of your email. This helps protect that information. It helps make sure that that sensitive information you're being sent is encrypted in such a way that you can feel confident sending that information over email. Now, you will receive an invoice from United, and that invoice will come very quickly generally. You'll see it very early on, but we'll talk a bit more about how that works in a later slide. The spreadsheet can also be used to update contact information or to remove coverage. So that same spreadsheet you do for enrollment, if you need to make an update of some kind, you can use that same spreadsheet to do that update, generally for contact information, as mentioned, or if you need to remove a student. Now, dental and vision enrollment, again, is done by that EMI portal, and it is done by the census deadline for each semester. They will supply a department with a bill, and that bill is both a semester bill in some cases and an annual bill that you can review and make payments accordingly. Failure to pay those bills by the deadlines may result in that coverage being terminated. So it's very important you are watching for those bills and paying those bills at the appropriate times. Nothing can be more stressful for the student than suddenly losing health insurance. That is not something that we want to see happen. So make sure that you're watching for your bills. Now, as a quick overview of those enrollment methods, I tried to put both of them side by side so that we could really compare and contrast. We have United first. That is an enrollment spreadsheet, as I said before. So it's an actual Excel spreadsheet that you're going to need to have filled out with the appropriate information. As a note, you only need to enroll the department paid students via this method. If they are on the GSHIP, as the next bullet marks, we will do that enrollment here. So you do not need to include those GSHIP students on your department paid spreadsheet that you're sending in. Only include your department paid students. You email that spreadsheet to SID Premium, as we mentioned, and then you are good. Those students will move forward. They will do that enrollment themselves there. Now for EMI, it is a little different again, as we mentioned. You're going to be doing that via the portal. So the department uses the EMI Enrollment Portal. You'll log in and you will start doing your enrollment there. And that little button that I've included there, that yellow one, is kind of how you move forward with that enrollment. That's the thing that you're going to be looking for to start. So you'll start with your open enrollment for existing students. If your students were in previously, you can use that open enrollment to essentially kind of carry them over, and it helps streamline the process a little bit. And that is found on the enrollment section. If you have new students, you can use the new hire section to add them in new and add all that new information that will be needed to get them that insurance. Enroll, again, only your department paid students via the portal. If they're going to be on GSHIP, we will do that enrollment here. So you do not need to include them as part of that process. And you want to complete all this initial enrollment by the census deadline. That is really the date that you're looking for to make sure that this all gets done in a timely manner. Now, department enrollment as far as GSHIP and student paid information. Now, subsidized students must add dependents themselves during United's open enrollment period for each semester, if not adding annual coverage in the fall. So they do not need to wait for their coverage, however, which is a great bonus for them. While we do our enrollments as quickly as we possibly can, if they're adding those dependents for United, then they can actually jump on this process as soon as possible. And United will hold that information until they are fully enrolled by whatever means, and then they will add the dependent information on their side. Now, they can do this very simply by going to the website noted there, and they will click on enrollment info. This actually opens a new part of the page that shows them what they need to do. And it looks a little bit like the screenshot I've included there that says, due to certain restrictions, they need to do a paper enrollment form. The student would fill out that paper enrollment form with the appropriate information, and then they would submit it accordingly. That form, again, reserves that coverage for the student's dependents. They do not need to wait until the student themselves have been enrolled. They can jump on this as soon as possible to help expedite and hold that as soon as possible. For EMI, they have a separate form for adding dependents to vision and dental coverage. The form is one that is kind of unique, so we will be sending that out to departments once we have that available, at very latest by August. And then when you get that form, you will check the box at the top that indicates that the student is responsible for paying the premiums and include any information that the form requires. Currently, the dependent enrollment form is the only method for enrolling dependents that are for subsidized students. This is for various reasons. It kind of goes back to that regulatory restrictions that we mentioned in the previous screenshot. And so that is the only method that we have for that at this time. Departments, it's very important that, again, when you're emailing this form, always include that PHI in the beginning of the subject heading. And you will send that to tbell@emihealth.com. That is Taylor. They will receive that and process that as soon as they are able. Please do not send forms to our office. If it is these dependent enrollment forms, we do not need to receive these. From what I understand, that may have been a case in a previous past, but that is not the case anymore. You can send that directly to tbell@emihealth.com. Now, as far as dependent enrollment for department paid side, you will add dependents using the department enrollment spreadsheet. So that same spreadsheet that you added for students, you will use your spreadsheet to add dependents. If the student is eligible for GSHIP, you should still use your department enrollment spreadsheet, since your department is going to be the one paying for the dependent premium. We do not pay for the dependent premium here, so if we've added them as part of GSHIP, you still need to add the dependents via your enrollment spreadsheet. However, a note with that is that we ask that you do not change the student's location. Remember that if we have added them via the GSHIP, their location will be 1. We don't want to change their location over to you, because then that moves those costs around and it creates some extra confusion and problems. So do make sure that the location for the student remains the same while you are doing your dependent enrollments. Now, as far as EMI is concerned, you can use the EMI portal to enroll dependents that the department is paying for. So you would follow the instructions on the portal to add those student dependents in. Now, dependent coverage, as a note, the graduate school does not pay for dependent coverage. That is true for both United and for EMI. Now, as far as United is concerned, dependent coverage can be enrolled by the department, and the dependent coverage can also be directly paid by the department. So you can pay for those dependents if you want to include that as a benefit for your student. Otherwise, it will be the student who needs to pay for that. The student can directly enroll their dependents via the United website as well. They want to follow the instructions we noted before. For EMI Health, the graduate school does not pay for dependent coverage, as I mentioned before, and they need to complete the EMI dependent coverage form. That form is sent directly to EMI, as we mentioned before, and dependent coverage for EMI costs follow the student. So that means that the dependent coverage will appear on the GSHIP invoice if the student is on GSHIP. However, as we noted before, we do not pay for that. So we will reach out to your department at that time to request an appropriate chart field to pay for the dependent coverage. Part of the reason that this is it makes the process more simple. If we tried to make it so that every chart field was attached when we were making that payment and moving that information around, it would extend the process greatly. And so to help make everything more simple for Jen Ehlers, as she is doing her job, which we all appreciate her doing, that we just pay for that here and then request those chart fields individually for the department to make up the difference. Now, as far as United's open enrollment dates, we are awaiting some final confirmation of those dates at this time. I have included the previous cycle's dates. If you are interested and want to look at those, you can anticipate the dates will be similar. There might be some slight changes, of course, as there's always 1 or 2 days difference, but you can anticipate you're looking at similar open enrollment dates with those. These dates will be posted in the brochure that is included as in our outreach, and it will also be on the United website for students and admins to see at any time. The cutoff date is the last date that students are able to be enrolled, however, so it is very important to watch those dates and know when you can move forward with open enrollment information. Now, we're going to talk briefly about the international students process, just because as you have international students coming in that you're wanting to decide, are we going to cover them on GSHIP? Are we going to do department paid, or do we want to allow or just let them continue with the normal, payment method through Carey Hill? How do we want to move forward with that? Well, I'm going to include some information that the university has, greatly worded for us. The university wants to ensure that the international students are fully covered by adequate health insurance while they are in the US. For more information on that, you can see the website that is listed there. Each semester, Student Health automatically enrolls all F1 and J1 visa students into the voluntary student health plan. The dates for those, as you can see, are the same as the others. So it is the same length of coverage, it is the same amount of time, and it is the same United Healthcare, health insurance. It will look very similar. If an international student has an existing insurance plan that they would prefer to use and only use, they may be eligible to apply for a waiver for the insurance requirement. So they will want to follow the appropriate chains and make sure that they are applying for that if so. Students are going to be billed via income accounting if they are enrolled via Carey Hill and the international office. That will just be their bill. They will see that and they will need to pay that. So it's something to keep in mind that that is kind of the difference here. Is the student going to be paying for that? Is the department going to be paying for it? Or do we want to move them on to GSHIP so that it's paid by those methods instead? They are not automatically enrolled from vision and dental. It's not considered mandatory as part of the international, side of that process, and therefore they are not going to be enrolled for that. You do get students who will ask questions about that. That is something I have seen pretty regularly over the past year, is students not realizing one or the other as they denied the GSHIP, thinking that the program they were on did include vision or dental, which was not the case. So that's something that you'll want to be very clear with them as you're moving forward with these students. However, if they are part of GSHIP, again, we will enroll them for vision and dental. When we do the GSHIP enrollment, we do it for all of it, and we do it as soon as we possibly can. Now, if we have a bit of a flow chart, so if you're kind of wanting to know, like, what should be my thought process, what chain of thought should I follow, this is something that you can keep for your records. These slides, again, are going to be available, so you can pull this up anytime and kind of follow, hey, what should our thought process be when looking at these students and how we want to make sure they're supported? So the first thing that you'll want to ask yourself is the international student a TA, RA, GR, or GT, and are they at the 100% level? If so, those are the things that are required for the GSHIP. And if that's what we want to have them on, we will speak with the student. If the student agrees and wants to be on GSHIP, you will make sure that you mark that accordingly when you are doing your enrollment. That's just down in that yes section on the left. Enter on TB report, tick the insurance box. When you do that, that's the end of that process kind of for your side of things. That comes into my office. I see that you have marked them for the enrollment for the health insurance and GSHIP, and I will move forward in making sure that they get enrolled for that. Of course, if we run into any issues, such as their enrollment or things, we will be reaching out accordingly, but generally that should be a pretty easy part of the process. Now, let's say that they are not one of those things, like they are not a TA or RAG or GT, maybe they're not fully supported. We would move over to the no section of that and ask, does the department want to cover the insurance premiums for the student? Do you want to pay for those insurance premiums as a benefit to that student to encourage them to come here? If that's yes, you will pay for the health insurance portion of their bill through scholarship admin, and you will move forward with entering the enrollment where appropriate. So does the international student want vision and dental coverage, for example? That coverage isn't mandatory. If they were just enrolled as part of the international coverage or international side of that enrollment, then that EMI enrollment is going to need to be separate, and you're going to need to do that enrollment via the EMI web portal. Now, let's kind of move back up to the top. If the student is, an international student, and they want to just remain on their own thing, not on department covered insurance, do they want dental and vision still? If they do, you can direct them to just enroll themselves with EMI's program. That is available to them. That is an option. So if you're not going to be covering that insurance premium, but they still want to receive dental and vision via EMI, you can point them in that direction and they can do that enrollment on their own. They will be taking on that cost, however. And then finally, if they don't want to be a part of any of that and they just want to stay on the international insurance as it is provided originally and paid for by those appropriate offices, then you can just say that they will remain on that and no further changes really need to happen. Now, one of the bigger questions, what are the premiums? What are the expected costs for this moving forward into the semester? Because again, you are expecting to take on those costs. Unfortunately, we are still working with United on what those exactive annual rates are going to be looking like. And so we are waiting on that contract. Once we have that all finalized and ready to share, we will be sending that information out. However, EMI's information we do have available. You can see that the dental and vision have both actually gone down in their cost. That is a negative 5% change from previous years. So that is great. So that price is getting a little better. But you can see what those rates are and you can plan accordingly. As a note, EMI does allow a break in coverage with some arrangement with us. EMI will allow the waiting period to be waived as long as there is no more than one semester in break of coverage. If there's more than that, then that is something that they will have to wait for. Students can also still enroll in the voluntary plan. That is always going to be an option for them if they are wanting to get on that plan. Now, as far as reconciliation, how is this reconciled? When should we be looking at our numbers and making sure that we've enrolled the right amount of people and et cetera? That can be done by United by requesting an invoice from United. You would review that data and make any necessary changes via that spreadsheet. It is very important that you are reconciling your numbers. It's very important that you are checking that to make sure that the people you have in United match what you are wanting. Now with EMI, it's very similar. They send us some census information and then that is distributed accordingly. There was some that will go to you as if it is a department paid student and enrolled under your location. Then you will need to verify that that is correct. They are enrolled under the right location. It is one of your students and you are wanting to make sure you're paying for them. Those reconciliations or any changes prior to the reconciliation need to be done by October 1st. So if you're having a student that you find that needs to be changed, that needs to be done by that October 1st date. For spring semester, it is the same. They will send out that information and we will make sure that you are reviewing it and we're reviewing our own as well. And then if there is any changes that need to be made, that needs to be made by March 1st. So watch for those dates as we are moving forward with reconciliation. As for billing, the invoices for United are mailed for both semesters. You can request those invoices at any time, however, especially by logging into the portal and requesting accordingly. If you need that information, you can get that information whenever it is most appropriate. For EMI, that notification is actually done by the billing portal. So you'll want to watch the billing portal section of your EMI login. For the fall semester, you're looking about the end of October 2022 is when you're looking to see this information. During fall, you will also notice, by the way, that there is a fall bill, and then there is also an annual bill. The annual bill is a subject that these students are going to be moving forward and will all be the same throughout the year. It is only recommended that you pay the annual rate if you know you're not going to have changes, if you anticipate those students are going to remain the same during that entire time. Even one change, however, will make that complicated. So it's one of those only move forward if you are fairly confident with that annual rate. Otherwise, paying the fall rate is fine. You would pay that invoice by a 12/1 or whatever date is the most appropriate for that. If 12/1 runs on a Sunday, for example. And then for spring semester, that's going to be the end of March instead. And you'll be looking at paying that invoice by 5/1. Now, just very briefly, this is kind of what the EMI portal login looks like. You will need to have both logins linked onto one page, but once you are logged on, you can see that you can access My EMI Health to review your enrollments, the students, the information that you have there, and also bill pay. So that's where you will see that bill information that I was speaking about on the last slide. And to add on to that, I actually have a bit more information on that. The EMI Billing Portal looks something like so. In the fall, again, you'll see those two invoices. Look at the invoice number, determine which one that you are looking at. You'll want to find the one that says fall or the one that says annual to make sure you're looking at the appropriate information while the fall information is available. If you make changes to your invoice, so if you're looking at and making updates and etc. as you move forward with this process, please make sure that you upload that via the upload a document button. This helps give EMI a touch point where they can go back and see where those changes are coming from or what those requested changes are. It gives them a very good starting place. So make sure you are including that information. Now, while you are working on those payments, it's very important that you are selecting the appropriate payment types and documenting everything accordingly. For example, when you're working with this, you want to make sure you're selecting the correct vendor numbers while making that documentation. Those vendor numbers are here, in which these slides will be available so you can find this information. And you'll want to make sure you're using the correct account number. The account number 65810 has been set aside for student insurance, so you'll want to make sure you're selecting the appropriate number. As far as scholarship admin, it is important you're documenting these payments in scholarship admin, and those payments made on behalf of a student should be reported. You need to make sure that's there. The item type is going to be a miscellaneous item type, and you're going to report one total, health and vision and dental all together. If you're paying semester invoices, you can report fall 2023 and the spring 2024 amounts. And if you're paying an annual invoice, you will report the amount that the semester bill was paid. And an example is kind of there in that screenshot. You can see its type is other, the other is health, vision, dental insurance. The purpose is for student insurance, and then you include the appropriate amounts there. Now, this is not an entirety of all of the GSHIP process. There are a lot of questions that, of course, I'm sure have come up in the comments or in the chat box or etc. And I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions, so we'll get to those in just a moment. But as a note, we do have a few more upcoming workshops. On July 6th, we're going to have the TVP Fall Prep Q&A, frequently asked questions. So if you have any questions that are coming up as far as fall entering, etc., that's going to be a great place to bring them because other people may be having the same questions. So we want to make sure that if there's anything we can help with as we get ready for fall, that'll be the day to really look forward to. Additionally, there will be a discussion on graduate school funding opportunities given by Matthew Plooster. Dr. Plooster is very wise in these things, so obviously that would be an incredible presentation to sit in on. Just wanted to make sure those were there, but we'll go ahead and kind of move into the questions section of this. Now, as a note, we can, of course, put the questions in the chat. You can raise your hand via the Zoom function, and we will call on you and bring those questions to light. Or if you don't feel comfortable bringing those questions up to the group or in the chat, you can wait and we will stay on the line as long as we can to answer as many questions as possible. Or you can, of course, reach out to me personally. You can send that to my email or to the general tuition benefit inbox. If I am not sure of an answer, I will find an answer. That's the kind of person I am. So I always want to make sure that I am finding the best information I can for you. And finally, if you are wondering, there will be a copy of this presentation, both the slides and the video that we are recording now, and that will be made available on our website under coordinator resources within the next few days at most. But with that being said, we can probably move to turning off that recording and moving to just